Hello and welcome to Raisu's Reviews. Today I just want to talk about 6 tips for getting into figure collecting. It's a tough hobby to get into, so hopefully these will help a bit. And obviously these are just things I've noticed through my years of hobby collecting, things I've noticed other people talk about, be it on Reddits or back on the day on forums and stuff like that. Yeah, so hopefully this is a good starting place to figure out what you want your figure collection hobby to look like. So let's get going, and we'll start out with number 1. Figure collecting is not an investor's hobby, and I'm gonna put in brackets mostly. I've been into a few different collecting hobbies over the years. I was into retro games when I was a kid and a little bit in my adulthood. That hobby just got terrible. I'm sure people who are in it are aware. Magic the Gathering, other hobbies, Pokemon cards for a bit. And you can tell in those hobbies there's certain people who only get into the hobby for the investing and money making side of it, especially in retro games. I would say for figures, with a few exceptions, figures generally degrade in value, even if left up unopened in perfect quality. There's a few reasons for this. Mainly, I think one of the biggest factors is that figures are terrible to sell. They're hard to ship. They cost a lot to ship, and doing it from person to person is not super fun. I'm gonna say later you shouldn't sell your figures, but like just buying a bunch of figures for the purpose of selling them is not fun. Unless you're a store, unless you're a store doing it. But if you're like an individual just trying to make some bucks on the side by buying a few figures, first off, the space takes up is just not economical, and second off, it's just such a pain. The second reason is figures are very unpredictable. They get re-released all the time, and like there's warning, right? But if something gets re-released, its value just absolutely tanks. Some good examples are Alter. Alter makes a bunch of really good figures, and they also tend to re-release them, which tends to decrease the value. Back in the day when Alter Coterie came out, I'd say one of my holy grails of figures. Like it came out at a time where it was quite a big step up from other figures. I had a friend who bought one and left it in their box the whole time, and I think if you were to sell it now in that same state, you maybe get what you paid for. Maybe after shipping it yourself and everything, probably not, unless you sold it locally. But that's really hard to do. You have to have the community for it. And also like Godoka from back in the day, which is also another one of the figures that was like one of the big figures. She also really got re-released and then tanked a bunch, and like those were like the expensive figures back then. But it's just too unpredictable. It's really hard to make money off figures. There is some notable exceptions, which Mia from Monster Musume by De Molto Bene, she goes for about 9 times her original price. I guess we'll call that like a lightning in the bottle moment for the people who got that. That's a really rare situation. I don't know. I didn't look too much into it. I don't know if Molto Bene just kind of went out of business, so like, it's just not going to get reproduced anymore or anything like that. It's just that figure's really expensive. Some random Nendroids from like, not the really early Nendroids that look terrible, but like some of like the earlier Nendroids like Akane from Psycho-Pass, those can be pretty expensive for a Nendroid. Those ones are some of the other exceptions. And yeah, you just kind of have to get lucky. It isn't really based on any logic. Some figures really keep their value, some figures don't, even though they're good figures. But sometimes if a figure's too good, it's just going to get a re-release. That's just figure collecting. The turnaround on time too for investing in figures is just very, very long. Because from when a figure is put up for pre-order to when it goes up on for sale, and for when people have it in their hands, and when they start selling it or are looking to buy secondary versions, it's just too long. And characters like fall out of favor, and maybe like the show starts getting bad. There's just so many reasons a figure can tank. poor quality over time, like with some weird standing figures that I point out all the time. So many reasons. There's also a bunch of figures that they kind of just flood the market on. Like, if you ever go to Japan recently, there's just like 2 million Spy Family figures. And you just want, and also Quince. And you're just like, they're going for really, really cheap because there's just too many of them. And that is another risk. So it's just really hard to. I'm sure there's some people out there who have made money on figures. It's just, I wouldn't recommend it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't sell your figures though. Selling figures is a very normal part of being a figure collector. You only, as you can see, like from our background, like we're kind of out of room already. So when we get new figures, we put old figures into storage, and eventually those old figures, you want them to go. And the best places for these, I think, is like if you have like a flea market attached to your anime convention, or just like your Japanese cultural center, like any kind of like anime garage sale, and you can offload them for 25 or 30, even 40% of their value. That's a good deal. You made someone's day. They have a new figure. You got some space back, and maybe like you got $40, $50. Don't try to sell them like they're. I hate when I go to garage sales and people are trying to sell figures at like their price you would have to buy them off the internet. No. You're going to a local sale, sell them for like 50, 60, sell a $160 figure for $80. Who cares? At least you don't have it in your house anymore, and you can use that room to store more Nendroid boxes or whatever you need to store. But anyways, also I'm going to do a side tip. Don't be afraid to throw away your boxes. Up next we have goal number 2. Tip number 2 is to set goals. Figure collecting can be quite expensive. So you need goals to kind of put limiters on yourself. So you don't just end up looking at Ami every morning and be like, oh, I need this, pre-order. Oh, I need this to pre-order. Oh, I need this pre-order. And then 3 months down the line, you're like, Ami's like, hey, I need $2,000. You're like, oh, crap, Ami needs $2,000. So I had this problem early on when I got into figure collecting, where I just kind of wanted to buy everything, even remotely close to what I liked, and I ended up with figures I don't really care about. Still have some of those figures sitting in storage, and they're like really hard to sell because they're old figures. But anyways, set goals. One of the most common goals that people set is, I won't buy X unless, or I'll only buy X. So a good example is, I won't buy stuff from shows I haven't watched or engaged with. Shows or games, because there's a lot of game figures these days. So like, say you're just a random who's never played Blue Archive in their life, and they're like, I like all these cute Bunny Girl Blue Archive figures, but I'm putting my foot down. I can't buy any more Bunny Girl figures from Blue Archive. I haven't played a second of this game. And that's a good thing to do sometimes. Sometimes you only want to save it for characters that you have some kind of connection with of some sort. I've kind of mostly adhered to from the series I have an attachment to recently. Maybe I bought a Ryza figure a while ago. That's one of the big exceptions. But then since I've played Atelier Sophie, does that count? Maybe one day I'll get to Ryza. These are the kind of excuses you can make. Another one you can do is, one I also am doing is, I'm going to buy every piece of merchandise for this character, but then my other character figure spending will be maybe like $500 a year or whatever. So as a totally made up number that is lower than my budget for figures for a year. So like, I really like Rice Shower, and I basically buy anything Rice Shower that comes up that is reasonable. I still haven't bought her cardboard standee because it is too much money, but that's a really good one, depending on your character. If your character is Rem or Hatsune Miku or recently like Spy Family, you probably will go bankrupt, because and recently I've like limited myself on Nendroids. I used to buy Nendroids for every character I liked, and I've kind of slowed down. My partner still buys them like crazy, but I slowed down to like, I think the last Nendroid I got was Rice Shower, and maybe before that was like Gura, like a long time ago, Satania, and those have been years ago now. By now, so yeah, only characters you really like for Nendroids, because there's just, oh, I kind of like this character, I'll get their Nendroid, but Nendroids are getting expensive. They're almost $100 now. So just keep a good goal in mind. Some other ones, fun goals, is like only bunny girl B styles, or girls sitting on stuff, or duo figures, like when there's 2 characters in one figure, or I only buy Alter 1/7 scales by this sculptor. Insert your favorite sculptor here. Who actually knows the names of sculptors, though? That's when you gotten really deep into figures. Maybe you limit yourself to 1 scale per quarter. It doesn't matter. It's just good to be aware of your spending and have some kind of limiter, so that when the really good figures come around, you're ready for them. And that will lead into my 3rd tip, which is if you really truly love it, pre-order it. This one might seem counterproductive to my previous money saving tip, but hear me out. Maybe it's just me, but there's a certain feeling that comes over me when I see certain figures on AmiAmi pre-orders, or when the event Twitter threads come up. Usually only happens once in a while, and I usually end up buying these figures. The last time I had this reaction was the Taiga figure from a few events ago that is unpainted still, where she's wearing the like knight's armor. I can't wait for that figure to get painting. That's a day 1 buy. But there was a Alter Flandre that I was a little unsure on. I really loved it because I love Flandre, and it's Alter, and they're like my favorite company, and I didn't get it, and I didn't really think about it for a while after that. But then I went to Japan and I saw the figure, because they had like a Toho display at AmiAmi figure, the brick and mortar AmiAmi store in Radio Kaikon, and they just had her sitting out there, and I was like, this figure is incredible, like flawlessly incredible. One of the best figures I've ever seen, and now it is like $600 before shipping, and it's an oversized figure, so that's going to cost you like $800 after customs if you're lucky. So that figure is just out of my price range now, so I really regret that one. And again, figures are just so unpredictable. You don't know what gets re-released. You don't know what happens to a figure after it's released. You don't know how many they made. It's just provisional pre-order, stuff like that. You just, if you don't have this feeling for, it's hard to say like limit on this feeling, but if there's something you really, really love, pre-order it. The worst thing you can do is cancel it before AmiAmi asks you to pay for it. Which leads me to my 4th tip. I'm running out of rice showers for this bit. Is don't be afraid to cancel stuff if you've fallen out of love. We'll get into this one. This one is probably affects most long-time figure collectors. I'm sure if you've been in the figures for 15 years, I'm sure you've canceled as many figures as you own. If you're like me, at least. Let's put a scenario into mind. December is rolling around, and every day you fear that payment request from AmiAmi for the B-style Nagatoro you pre-ordered 8 months ago. 8 months ago you said, that's a future me problem. But now it's 8 months from now. And AmiAmi wants $400 plus shipping. And then you also have to pay customs on top of that. So you go back and you look at that Nagatoro B-style again. You just look at the product images and you think to yourself, do I like you that much? And I'm sure this has happened to everybody, but like my first instinct when I start thinking that is that I should cancel my pre-order. So I don't want to be dreading paying for a figure, because at that point I feel like I'm buying figures for the sake of buying figures, which is a scary place to be. I should be buying figures because I like the figure. And I started looking at this Nagatoro B style and I was just like, no, I don't want this in my house. It's kind of doesn't really mesh with what I'm going for. It's too big and I don't have space for it. And it's, yeah, I know I do own some skeevy figures from my past in the back, but I'm trying to get away from that these days. So I decided to cancel it, and that's fine. It's okay to cancel stuff, because then you can save money for things you truly do love. And if your financial situation has changed also, it's okay to cancel things. just kind of make sure you know what you want, and what you want can change, and it also might mean you regret canceling your pre-order, which also happens. I can't think of a specific example right now. I'm sure it's happened to me in the past. There's also pre-orders I'm so glad I canceled. I almost bought the Griffin Enterprise Aya Shimemaru back in 2008, no, 2009 or 2010, and that's one of the ugliest Toho figures to ever be released. So I'm happy I did. And there's some other figures I wish I pre-ordered, like the Halloween Flandre and Remelia, that ended up, I had to end up melting their pieces with a hairdryer to get them to go together. So yeah, just make sure you cancel before your payment request comes out from AmiAmi. So if you're thinking about canceling, keep a good eye on that date, because once it's in stock and AmiAmi asks you for, or wherever you pre-order from, to cancel it, you'll have to email them. Once in a while they might accommodate you, but if you make it a habit, they will ban you. And being banned from AmiAmi makes it really hard to buy figures. Our fifth tip, yeah, I got a lot of these. It's okay, and these are where these come from also, is it's okay to buy secondhand and to use Yahoo Auction. I think this tip specifically goes better for merchandise, acrylics, etc., more than scale figures. So yeah, besides the AmiAmi section. Sometimes it's hard to find the merch figure you really want. That's why you might have to resort to secondhand. Personally, I would avoid stuff like eBay and some expensive second-party retailers, as the prices can be quite inflated. So what are these secondary retailers? Are places that buy from AmiAmi or other and then sell it themselves. I'm not going to name names. I think they're okay to use in a pinch. If you can't find if you're kind of just looking for the thing and you want to have the thing despite the price, that's where you should go. But it's been a long time since I've used one of them, and I try to avoid them just for financial reasons. AmiAmi has a really good secondhand section that details what you need to know about the figure's quality, and Japanese secondhand stuff is really well cared for in general. So they'll do stuff like item A, box C. So like box C could mean that like one of the flaps is a little bent, or the plastic insert is missing, or it could also mean like nothing. It could mean like there's a little dent in the side of the box. Japan is very like, they'll mark down those letters for the smallest things. I think the lowest you'll see is probably D, before they'll give you like another kind of warning, being like something like this figure is missing, like this figure is missing like a leg, and they'll tell you if it's missing a leg or something like that. And the markdowns can be pretty good sometimes. Some good sites for finding second-hand stuff are Mercari.jp and Surugia. We'll link those down in the descriptions. They're both Japanese sites. And there's also Yahoo Auctions, which is, frankly, my partner handles the Yahoo Auctions thing, and I don't really know how it works. We'll have a link in the description, but you have to use a proxy service. And that will cost you a little bit of money too, but you can find some really, really, really good deals on Yahoo Auctions. We've gotten like a bunch of like rice shower like bundles with a bunch of rice shower stuff. I got like a bunch of acrylics of another character I like, and like you can get some lots, I'd call them, just of a really good stuff. It's really good for building Ita bags, actually, if you're into Ita bags, because you just get like hundreds of pins that you need. And if people like getting out of the hobby, or they're moving on to a different character, if they're like one of those Jotaku who just do one character for a while and move on to the next. Yeah, really cool stuff, especially if you're into like smaller, more trinkety figure stuff. But you can find scales there too. It's just not as you kind of have to dig a lot for those. And another good source is the comments of a particular figure in My Figure Collection. This used to be the place to find figures in North America. I find MyFigureCollection.com has gotten a little bit worse over the last 4 years as kind of a ghost town. I was looking at some figures recently. I looked at the Flandre Altar one, and there's somebody selling her like a month ago. And another thing for my tip number 6, I can't even hold all these rice showers. This one's called Floppy. Is watch out for counterfeits. And I'm going to give some side tips in this about buying figures at conventions. So, I could do a whole video about counterfeits, but I don't... There's some good resources out there, and I'm not up to date on how to track counterfeits. I used to know back when I would buy figures at conventions, and I used to know what to look for, like different stickers and stuff like that. But counterfeits are getting better. They just get better every year. So one of the best ways to not run into counterfeits is to buy from Japanese websites. I think it is probably very, very rare that a Japanese website will sell you a counterfeit. I think it would be quite the ordeal for them, for their reputation. I think which they care a lot about, especially Ami, which is like I'm just gonna say 99.9% you're never gonna get a counterfeit on the Ami used section. So if you just stick to Japanese websites, you should be fine. Maybe the auctions you might run into it. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's a good place to stop. Just don't buy from websites that don't look trustworthy, right? Next one I would say is to not buy from conventions, which is kind of a hard thing to say because you want to support your local conventions, but I think the best way to do that is to go to the artist alley and support the artists there and buy their prints and stuff like that, or go to the local Japanese bakery and buy their sweets and stuff. But buying figures at conventions is quite the toss-up. First off, they're really expensive. The markup is incredible. I think you only buy from a convention if you 100% know it's not a counterfeit, and you just want the peace of mind of buying that figure and walking out of the convention with it instead of having to order it off the internet and wait for it to ship and pay customs and all that. And so the peace of mind sometimes is fine, but I don't think I've ever seen a scale figure at a convention that like a good scale figure for under $400. It's just maybe it's a Canada problem, but it's just they're just so overpriced. But I also think conventions are better at stopping counterfeits than they used to be. I know, like you went to an anime convention in 2009, you just had to go through like the counterfeit everything section of your dealer's room all the time. But these days you still don't know. On Sunday, maybe they open their plastic bin that the convention didn't check, and there's their box of counterfeit figures. They might not know it's counterfeit. They get it from whatever supplier they get it from. But yeah, just avoid convention buying. It's just not going to get you anywhere good. That's one of them. I think the best way is just to avoid counterfeits. Just don't buy from anime stores or anime conventions unless you know that your like local anime store is completely legit, like you are aware of their practices and you're like, okay, these people are good, then go ahead, because it's good to support local. But yeah, that's about it. If you can think of any other tips that or things you would like to know about figures, let me know in the comments. I'm always curious about a new person's perspective on figures. It's a very intimidating hobby, but it's really good when you get into it. Just start getting your first little holy grail figures out there to make you happy, and then you kind of know what you want to collect and what aesthetic you're going for and everything. And maybe in a future video we can talk about like storage methods and where to put your figures in your house and like how to protect them and everything. But for now, that will be the six tips out of the other rush hours over there to getting into buying figures. I hope this helped. Have a great day. Oh, and like and subscribe.